This old man has been trapped in the stairwell for 35 years. Every morning when he wakes up, the vending machine automatically restocks supplies. Cola and instant noodles are endless, so the old man eats instant noodles for all 3 meals. And in the backpack on the wall, MP3 players, earphones, and wallets keep appearing. With these supplies, surviving isn't a problem, but the only trouble is there's no internet. If it were you trapped here, could you last 35 years? 35 years ago, the old man was a rookie detective. That day he received orders from his superior to go to the target location to catch 2 thieves. The sudden appearance of the cop shocked the older brother John, but he didn't know his younger brother had already confessed to all the crimes. But the older brother didn't want to be arrested just like that, so he attacked when the cop let his guard down. The younger brother nearby also rushed in to help. Now the 2 of them had an extra charge of assaulting an officer. Then the brothers quickly ran into the stairwell to escape. Daniel, who came to his senses, followed right behind. After his repeated warnings didn't work, he decisively fired a shot downstairs. John, hit in the calf, collapsed instantly. But the strange thing was, it seemed like it was Daniel's first time firing a gun. At that moment he was very panicked. Even at John's wailing, he unconsciously dropped the gun in his hand. Then he stared at his own palm in disbelief. At this moment, an explosion suddenly came from upstairs. The sudden incident scared them badly, but John didn't care about that. The bleeding wound caused him unbearable pain. Andy quickly took off his clothes to bandage his brother's wound. Seeing his brother's painful expression, Andy wanted to settle the score with Daniel, but he was pinned against the wall by Daniel with a gun. Daniel warned him not to try anything. Once at the station, someone would treat them. Although the 2 brothers were very unwilling, but to survive, they had no choice but to obey Daniel's orders. On their way downstairs, Daniel suddenly felt a strand of hair on the back of his neck, but he thought it was just because the place was dirty, so he casually tossed it aside. When they reached the first floor, they found a problem. The exit was tightly locked from the outside. There wasn't even a doorknob inside. It was impossible to open it by hand from inside. But even stranger, there was actually another staircase under the first floor.
Pinche edificio raro.
They thought the workers had mislabeled the floors, so they kept going down. But the further they went, the weirder it felt. Looking down, they saw what seemed like countless floors below. They also looked up above, and saw the same situation above. They couldn't see the end at all. At that moment, John realized they were trapped, but Daniel didn't believe any of this. He thought it was a trick by the brothers, but seeing the clueless look on their faces, he threatened them to stay put and not move, while he went to look for a way out alone. But no matter how hard he tried, he found nothing. Even scarier was, when Daniel reached the first floor again, there was suddenly a vending machine there. A somewhat broken Daniel started smashing the stairway door, but the door was still sealed shut like it was welded. When he kept walking down, he actually saw the 2 brothers again. Daniel stared at them in disbelief. He had clearly gone downstairs. Why did they come down from above? Unwilling to give up, Daniel ran up the stairs again, but in the end he still came back from below, to the same spot. Desperate, Daniel leaned against the wall and thought for a while. Then he took out the key from his pocket and dropped it through the gap of the stairs. But after a while, the key fell straight down from above, and the sound of the key hitting the railing made everyone's hearts sink to the bottom. Daniel desperately took off his jacket, then pulled out his gun, and questioned the brothers if they had drugged him, making him see all these terrifying hallucinations. But deep down he knew it was all caused by that explosion. He just didn't want to admit it. At this point, Andy didn't care to argue with Daniel, because he was really worried about his brother's wound. Andy took out his phone with trembling hands, trying to call emergency services, but found there was no signal at all. He broke down and shouted loudly downstairs. His desperate cries echoed through the empty stairwell. Looking at his suffering brother, Andy's tears burst out. He wanted to take the bullet out for John, but John stopped him. After all, Andy couldn't even bandage properly. Letting him take the bullet out would only cause infection. The only solution now was to clean the wound with fresh water to slow down the infection. Just then Daniel happened to smash the vending machine door. He picked up a bottle of water ready to drink. Andy angrily snatched the water from his hand and started treating his brother's wound. Daniel didn't get mad seeing this. He just calmly opened his wallet. Today was his wedding anniversary. He had planned to finish the mission quickly and go home, but didn't expect to be trapped here. Hearing John's painful groans, Daniel hesitated for a moment, but still handed his painkillers to Andy. But just as he got up, a playing card suddenly fell to the ground, but he didn't think much of it. He just tore it up and threw it aside, and John fell into a deep sleep after taking the painkillers, but his condition didn't last even 2 days. Because of excessive blood loss, he stopped breathing in Andy's arms. Andy fell into endless despair. At this moment, Daniel suddenly noticed the food in the vending machine had automatically refreshed. This phenomenon completely broke Daniel down. He shook the vending machine like crazy, trying to break this terrible loop. Seeing this, Andy immediately rushed forward, snatched the gun and pointed it at Daniel's head. He wanted to avenge his brother, but he didn't know there were no bullets left in the chamber. However, this kind of loop didn't just happen in the stairwell. When Daniel was a child, his family was preparing to go to a seaside villa for vacation. Because his younger sister had asthma, so his mom told Daniel to bring his sister's spare inhaler. Before leaving, Daniel didn't forget to bring a playing card. At 2 p.m., the whole family happily set out. Everyone was looking forward to the trip, but on the way, his stepfather suddenly pulled out a bamboo stick from nowhere, but he didn't pay much attention to it. He just casually threw it away. Soon they arrived at a gas station, planning to stop and take a break. Then the stepfather leaned against the car, chatting with his daughter. He was drinking pomegranate juice. Although his daughter was allergic to these drinks, the stepfather still let her take a sip. At that moment, the daughter handed her inhaler to her stepfather, then went to the restroom, but not long after, the mother came out angrily and scolded her husband for letting their daughter drink juice, because the sugar in the drink would trigger an allergy. But this little episode soon passed. The family continued their trip. On the way, the daughter's asthma really did flare up. They stopped the car urgently. The stepfather quickly pulled out the inhaler his daughter had given him, but accidentally dropped it on the ground and stepped on it, breaking it. The mother quickly told Daniel to get the spare inhaler. That was when Daniel realized he had forgotten it, so the mother decided to turn back home immediately. But they had just driven out not far, when a huge explosion suddenly came from up ahead. This made the mom realize there was danger ahead. Seeing her daughter's symptoms getting worse and worse, the mom had no choice but to keep driving forward. When they passed the gas station from earlier, they found that it was completely empty. The mom quickly went to grab a box of allergy medicine. Then she kept driving home. The daughter's breathing was getting heavier and heavier. The anger the mom had been holding in suddenly exploded, but arguing couldn't change the situation. They kept driving forward, but never got off this road. The mom furiously cursed the stepdad for missing the turn. The stepdad was just about to explain himself. When he looked up, he saw that gas station again, and it was still completely empty inside. They kept on driving, and ran into the same billboard again. But this was the road the stepdad drove every single day. There was no way he'd mess it up, but they just couldn't get out. That's when the stepdad suddenly realized they had been driving the same road on repeat. But Daniel didn't believe a word he said. He just thought the stepdad was messing with them on purpose. But even when it was 7:19 at night, the sky was still bright as day. When they stopped at the billboard again, the daughter finally couldn't hold on anymore. The mom, seeing this, quickly carried her daughter outside the car to help her breathe a little easier. Then the mom comforted her daughter, telling her this was all just a nightmare, that they would be home soon, telling her to take deep breaths and steady her breathing. But even so, the daughter still fainted. The stepdad felt really guilty when he saw this, and the mom could only helplessly hold her daughter, praying to the heavens non-stop. When they came to the billboard once more, the stepdad completely lost his mind. After venting all his anger, he told his wife and kids to stay in the car, and planned to go look for help alone. But the daughter eventually stopped breathing. The mom broke down, got in the driver's seat, and started the car. She even kept hitting herself along the way, trying to wake herself up from the nightmare. No matter how Daniel tried to talk to her, it was useless. When the mom finally stopped the car, Daniel got out of the car holding his little sister. But by then, the mom had already lost her sanity. She didn't even notice them, until she drove to the gas station. That's when the mom staggered out of the car, soulless, and sat down in the convenience store in despair, mumbling to herself over and over, asking why she couldn't wake up. All along she thought she was just dreaming, while Daniel carried his sister back to the billboard. That's when the stepdad suddenly appeared from the woods. He tiredly knelt down on the ground, and weakly told Daniel they were stuck here and couldn't get out. 35 years later, the road was covered with trash. The stepdad had been wasting away his time, and the mom had developed dementia, and was used by the stepdad as an outlet for his anger. Daniel, on the other hand, lived separately from his parents, and managed to live a somewhat decent life. He used the work uniforms that refreshed every day to build a tent, and tossed all the refreshed respirators together. The reason Daniel faced life so positively was because he knew his sister wouldn't want him to live aimlessly. So he kept learning survival skills. Every day he listened to music, hiked, and trained his body. Daniel believed that one day he'd be able to get out of here, and through all these years his only form of entertainment was playing cards with a hamster, as if that way his sister was still by his side. One day the stepdad tried to wake up his still sleeping wife, but when he touched her, he realized her heart had already stopped beating. The stepdad just calmly gave her a kiss, then buried her next to their daughter. The mom's death brought the long-estranged father and son back together, but Daniel just silently watched. After burying his wife, the stepdad started recalling their old life, and remembered that sweet kiss before they left. Suddenly the stepdad collapsed on the ground with splitting pain in his head. He finally remembered everything. The scene went back to the stairwell again. 35 long years had passed in the blink of an eye. Daniel the cop had become depressed and dull, eating instant noodles and piles of trash every day, and his body grew frail and weak from lack of exercise. But Andy, because of his brother's last words, kept living positively. waking up on time every day to wash up, climbing the stairs for exercise, reading books and studying hard. He even used the bottled water that refreshed every day. To make a simple shower, 35 years of time, was enough to wash away the hatred between them. They could even calmly pray together in front of John's remains. Daniel was already a bit demented, but he still remembered that he had a wife and daughter, and that he had something important to tell Andy, but he just couldn't remember what it was. Just when they both thought they'd spend the rest of their lives here, Daniel, lying in the stairwell, suddenly screamed in pain. He finally remembered that important thing. Daniel started scribbling and drawing all over the wall, and said his wife and daughter didn't exist at all. Even his own 35 years of experience were fake. This space was the opposite of the real world. Everything they all passed on, and all the pain they suffered, was all so their real world selves could be happy. Turns out Daniel wasn't a cop at all. He was the boy who had been trapped on the highway for 35 years. The playing cards that showed up earlier, and the bamboo the stepdad threw away, were proof of the previous space, and were their only connection to the real world. But the father and son both, without hesitation, destroyed their chance to leave. If only they had triggered an accident. The same thing will happen to yourself. Someone once warned Daniel that he must write down his own name, and never pick up the red notebook. After he dies, when he walks back he'll see a police car, but he must never get in the car, otherwise they'll walk into a new prison. But Daniel didn't listen to these warnings, so he forgot his own name, forgot his own past, and in the end he was trapped in this space forever. Now Daniel, in the same way, warned Andy beside him, then died with endless regret. When Andy picked up the red notebook, he realized it had all been arranged already. His brother's death wasn't an accident. Daniel not bringing a respirator wasn't an accident either. Everything was a script written in advance. What's even more terrifying is, the script was precise down to the angle of the gunshot, and where the bullet hit. And in another space Daniel also ignored his stepfather's warning, and picked up the red notebook in his hand, then walked back according to the instructions. Soon enough, he really did see a brand new police car. When he walked up to the car, he suddenly remembered his stepfather's words again, but the thought of escaping still took over. So Daniel went back to camp to pack his things. After setting the tent on fire, he took the hamster and got into the police car. But the moment he opened the car door, he had already forgotten everything. When he opened his script, it said he was a police officer with a wife and kids, so he cut his hair with scissors. That's why he would feel hair on the back of his neck. He put on the police uniform, drove the police car, and left the desert successfully, then slowly drove toward the staircase that would trap him. And Andy didn't listen to the warning either, because when he saw the staircase unchanged for 35 years, a sudden elevator door appeared. The thought of escaping almost drove him insane. Andy hysterically tore apart the books, trying to suppress the desire in his heart. He even picked up the gun placed beside his brother's body, and pointed it at himself, wanting to end this ridiculous farce right there. But in the end, Andy couldn't pull the trigger. He still couldn't resist the temptation, and pressed the elevator button. And from the moment Andy entered the elevator, he lost his past memories and identity, and he also had a red notebook now. Andy's new identity was Carl, a hotel waiter. As the elevator slowly opened, a young couple walked in. When they walked out of the elevator into the hotel hallway, Carl deliberately released a bee to sting the groom. Right after that, they heard the explosion again, and a new round of the cycle began. And in the end, the bride died on the escalator, but she didn't change out of her wedding dress, because she still remembered that she was once a bride. This round of the cycle ended because of her death. When she was about to close her eyes, the child who was supposed to take over didn't pick up the red notebook, but instead took the hamster from her hands. But that unexpectedly broke this horrible cycle.